They say the dead can't speak. But inside 1122 King Road, something's still screaming. 4 bodies, brutal injuries, minutes of silence where there should have been screams, and a suspect who doesn't fit the math. From the very beginning, they told us this was a lone wolf murder. 1 man, 1 knife, 1 night. But the autopsies say otherwise. The timeline says otherwise. The crime scene, soaked in blood, yet mysteriously tidy in places, says otherwise. This isn't about gut feelings. It's about facts. And the facts are screaming that this wasn't the work of 1 man moving through that house like a ghost. Not with the level of overkill we saw. Not with the different locations, multiple floors, and 2 surviving roommates left untouched. Someone's lying. Or worse, covering. Because this case was never about solving a murder. It was about preserving a narrative. And somewhere in that silence, justice was smothered. Let's stop pretending this was clean. 4 victims, 2 floors, 1 knife and a time window so impossibly tight, even the most trained killers would have broken a sweat. But we're supposed to believe 1 man, alone, uninjured and unfamiliar with the layout, slipped in, slaughtered 4 people, and vanished into the night without anything pointing to a rushed, frenzied attack. Nope. Let's break this down like the coroner never did. According to the official timeline, the murders took place between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. That's 25 minutes, start to finish, for 4 brutal up-close stabbings. Not shootings, not poison, not something from a distance. These were stabbings, loud, messy, prolonged and personal. Imagine stepping into a crime scene where time itself refused to stand still. Where every wall echoed with screams that actually made it outside, yet none were heard from within the home. This wasn't a quick in and out. This wasn't a surgical strike. This was an act of extended carnage. The official autopsy documents confirm what many suspected but few could stomach. These weren't just murders, they were massacres. The victims didn't just die. They were hunted, one by one, with a level of force, repetition, and brutality that rewrites the entire timeline we were sold. Xana Kernadal endured the most brutal death of all 4 victims. A staggering 67 stab wounds, nearly half the total count between all of them. This wasn't fast. It wasn't quiet. It was frenzied, targeted violence that left its mark on every inch of her body. The autopsy filings reveal injuries to her face, neck, torso, back, arms, and legs. Deep punctures penetrated her jugular vein, lungs, heart, and pulmonary vessels. She hemorrhaged into her chest cavity. Her hands had wounds down to the bone, the unmistakable signs of someone blocking, grabbing, fighting, with everything she had left. There was blood on the bottoms of her feet, indicating she moved during the attack. That means she was upright, at least for part of it, trying to run, trying to live. This was a battle, not a blitz. And in a house where the official story says no one heard a thing. Xana Kernadal's death screams otherwise. Kaylee Goncalves was butchered. She suffered 38 stab wounds, concentrated in the head, face, neck, and upper body. And that wasn't all. Her autopsy also revealed blunt force trauma, asphyxial injuries, and punctures to the skull, tongue, and teeth. Her mouth was a target. Let that sink in. Injuries to the teeth and tongue. Someone wanted to shut her up for something, or punish her, in the most intimate and violent way. There was a hemorrhage into her chest cavity, evidence of deep, driven force. She was nearly decapitated. That's not an act of random opportunity. Madison was stabbed 28 times. She had some defensive wounds, which means she saw it coming, even if only for a moment. That's enough to paint a nightmare. She and Kaylee were in the same bed, meaning the killer had to strike 2 people in a tight space with precision, force, and full awareness. The bed became a crime scene soaked in overlapping trauma. Blood evidence, though largely redacted, has been described by experts as violent, arterial, and indicative of multiple high-velocity strikes. One girl likely screamed, the other fought. Either way, it took time. And it left behind evidence and the personal nature of the wounds. Ethan Chapin, the strongest one. 17 stab wounds. No defensive injuries. But don't let that fool you. Ethan was a 6'2" D1 athlete, a strong, capable man. No one walks up on someone like that and drops them silently in a few seconds. So why no defensive wounds? It suggests one of two things. He was attacked from behind, possibly while asleep, or he was restrained, ambushed with help, or disabled before he could react. That brings me back to the pop sound. You know, the one where Miss No Tears won an Oscar for Best Performance. You know, the performance where she raised all of that money for healing. Despite the fact that she said she had no clue of what was taking place, but now needs money and sympathy. Yeah, the one taking away from the actual victims. That one. And if he was killed first, that would have required overwhelming force, or a second person. Because if Ethan had even a second to fight, there would have been signs. Skin under fingernails, bruises, loud thumps that could surely be heard if Vampire Diaries wasn't purposely playing so loud in the background, allegedly. But the absence of a struggle might actually tell us the loudest truth. He never saw it coming, or someone made sure he couldn't. Add up the math. 67 plus 38 plus 28 plus 17 equals 150 plus stab wounds. And that's just what the body could still show. Some blows overlap. Some organs were hit multiple times. And some wounds were so deep, they rendered tissue unrecognizable. But here's the forensic kicker. Each of those wounds took time. Each thrust of the knife required force, angle, leverage. And in several cases, multiple deep strikes were delivered in close succession, indicating momentum. That's not just about killing. That's about destroying. You don't destroy unless you have time. You don't have time unless no one's fighting back. And if people were fighting back like Xana, you don't get to finish 4 murders unless you have backup. They told us it was one man. In and out. 4 dead, not a scream heard, no second weapon found. And the autopsy reports show that this was messy. Impossible to reconcile with a single, unaided attacker, especially one who had never killed before. Because you don't hold down 2 girls in the same bed. Stab them dozens of times each, without noise. But with these girls were fighting like Xana. The attacker or attackers were dodging her kicks, her blocks, her flight. And you damn sure don't quietly kill Ethan Chapin, a man built like a linebacker, without him putting up a heck of a fight. So ask yourself, if the wounds say this took time, if the pattern says they were fighting for their lives, if the brutality says this wasn't one person, why are we still pretending it was? 'Cause the bodies are speaking. And the silence surrounding them. That's not justice. That's a cover-up. Here's where the math starts breaking bones. Let's say each murder took 5 minutes. That's conservative for hand-to-hand homicide. That's 20 minutes, minimum. And that's if the killer never paused, never panicked, and moved like a machine through a house full of bodies, stairs, obstacles, and variables. Not counting entry. Not counting exit. Not counting the fact that Xana's DoorDash delivery had just occurred minutes earlier, meaning someone could have been seen. Still think it was one guy. In Vans. With 0 blood trail out of the house. Let's not forget, no blood was found in Bryan Kohberger's car. Yeah, that's right, no DNA under his fingernails, no signs of injury, not even a scratch. And yet 4 people were eviscerated in a confined space, and he walked away untouched. This crime was very fast for just one man or woman to commit alone. It wasn't silent, and it wasn't solo. One man doesn't carve through a house like that, leave no trace, and still have time to call it a night. Unless the truth is what they've buried deepest. He didn't do it alone. Let's talk about Sigma Chi. A fraternity built on loyalty, secrecy, and brotherhood. But what happens when that bond protects something darker? Jack, the ex-boyfriend of Kaylee, along with Ethan Chapin, were both members. 2 brothers tied by ritual, image, and reputation. Xana wasn't just Ethan's girlfriend. She was inside the circle, the parties, in the group chats, around the pledges. She knew them, all of them. And if anyone had seen or heard something they weren't supposed to, it would have been her. Now look at the facts. Xana had 67 stab wounds. That's nearly half the total inflicted across all 4 victims. You don't do that to someone unless you're angry, unless you're sending a message, unless they're the real target. This wasn't random. This was ritualistic punishment. Think about it. 150 total stab wounds. That's not a frenzy. That's a statement. In certain occult and esoteric circles, 150 symbolizes blood sacrifice, particularly when tied to cleansing or initiation. The Hebrew gematria of 150 connects to the word mikveh, meaning purification, usually with water. But in this house, that purification came through blood. So what were they trying to purify? A secret, a betrayal, a witness. The overkill screams that this wasn't just about murder. It was about control and about power. It was about erasing the one person who might have been ready to expose something hiding behind Greek letters and smiling Rush Week photos. And don't forget, the one shoe print was at Dylan's door, not downstairs, not in Ethan's room. Dylan, the girl who said nothing for hours, who described the figure but never called for help. If Jack or someone else from Sigma Chi was involved, she might have recognized them, might have known them, might have been told to stay quiet, or else. The Frat connection turns this from a whodunit into a cover-up soaked in legacy and protection. Because if this was a message killing, one meant to silence Xana, then everyone else just became collateral damage. And that silence, it's still echoing through every courtroom, every press conference, and every blood-stained corner of 1122 King Road. If this was about rage, betrayal, or payback, Xana could have represented a double affront. She wasn't just Ethan's girlfriend. She may have been the bridge between multiple people inside that insular brotherhood. Her suffering, the overkill, could be seen as a message, not just to her but to those connected to her. And in that context, 150 wounds across 4 victims doesn't just look like a random killing for no reason. It starts to look like ritualized punishment. And why didn't this mean murderer kill everyone, especially if he encountered Miss No Tears? Now let's go deeper. There were whispers, unconfirmed but persistent, that a Sigma Chi brother had died in the months prior to the murders. Specifically, Ethan's best friend. Some say it was an accident. Others hint at hazing gone wrong, a death swept under the rug. If true, imagine the impact. A death that got covered. No justice. No accountability. And then this. A massacre that begins with Ethan, a frat brother, and spirals out to those closest to him. Was it revenge? Retaliation? A warning? In occult or ritual symbolism, the number 150 represents extreme upheaval, sacrifice, and cycles of death and rebirth. In the Old Testament, the number 150 appears in Psalms, a book often tied to judgment, punishment, and divine reckoning. Was this crime a modern-day blood offering to settle an old score? When the math meets the motive, and the wounds match the rage, the story we were told starts to rot from within. Let's strip the address down. 1122. That's not just 4 digits. That's repetition and mirror imagery. 11 and 22. In numerology, both are considered master numbers. 11 represents intuition, spiritual insight, and the opening of higher consciousness. But when distorted, it becomes confusion, illusion, and manipulation. 22 is the master builder, the number of those who shape reality. It's about power, legacy, creation. But in shadow, it becomes control, destruction, and collapse. Put them together, 1122. And you get a perfect symbolic duality. Creation and destruction. Insight and ignorance. The gateway and the grave. And it just so happens that 4 people died. 1 + 1 + 2 + 2 is equal to 6. In numerology, 6 is the number of harmony, family, the heart. But when corrupted, it symbolizes sacrifice. Now think about this. The house was bulldozed. An address that carried this coded energy. It was erased. But 1122 King wasn't just a house. It was a hotbed of social hierarchy. Sororities and fraternities nearby. Parties, drinking, power dynamics. A house at the top of the hill, quite literally overlooking others. And yet, it was left vulnerable. No cameras, no security. Sat in the open like bait. Some say it was just a college house. But others, they see a symbolic chessboard. The king fell, the queen fell, and then the pawns were sacrificed. So the board was wiped clean. Reports say the scene was unimaginably violent. Blood seeped from the walls. One photo showed it leaking through the foundation, like the house itself was weeping. And this wasn't a one-room crime. The bedrooms, the floors, the walls, the corners. And yet the poor, terrified basement girls lived. Yes. That's what I'm calling them, because they've earned that name. They wanted the attention, so now they have a name. And here's the kicker. Multiple accounts suggest phone, digital, and computer evidence was pulled from the home, then never mentioned again. Some even say a USB was taken by an officer and never logged. What did that house know? What did it see? Because houses hold memory. And 1122 King Road was saturated with energy, blood, and secrets. They didn't just tear down a house. They buried a ritual site. In many occult circles, mirror numbers like November 22nd are believed to signal points of ritual significance, like doors between realms. Whether intentional or not, the symbolism is there. You don't need a pentagram on the floor to call it ritualistic. The numerology alone suggests this location was a magnet for something darker. Let's not forget what this house represented to the town. A party haven, often with 20 to 30 people walking through on any given night. But that party house, it became a slaughterhouse. There were 4 victims that died in bed, which is symbolic of innocence and vulnerability. One fought like hell and the other collapsed in a hallway, depending on which story they want to tell. Symbolizing resistance, escape, liminality. That's not just random, that's staging. The rooms weren't just scenes, they were chambers. The bed Madison and Kaylee died in was a small shared space, boxed in by walls and lit by string lights. That's intimate. That's deliberate. That's ritual. And that shoe print outside Dylan's door. It wasn't a mistake. It was a marker, a message left behind, like a signature in blood. But let's dig into the metaphysical framework. Xana, who fought, took 67 stab wounds, her pain prolonged. Her resistance the loudest. She becomes the symbolic martyr, the one who tried to disrupt the flow. Kaylee, stabbed 38 times, nearly decapitated, her face and voice targeted, becomes the sacrificial offering. Madison, the witness beside the chosen, receives brutal wounds but less personal. The shadow victim, perhaps not meant to die. Ethan, strong, male, unmoving, possibly killed first. The guardian removed. This wasn't just a mass murder. The wounds tell a story. The setting reinforces it. The number 1122 binds it. And the silence afterward. That's part of the ritual too. 1122 King Road wasn't just a scene of unspeakable violence. It was a scene that looked too clean for what supposedly happened. Think about what we know. Punctured organs, arterial spray, defensive wounds. And not 1911 call for 8 full hours. And yet, investigators noted a lack of blood trail leading out the home. What kind of massacre happens like this, with so little visible blood in key exit areas? Where's the rest of the blood throughout the other parts of the house? Multiple forensic experts, including retired FBI agents, have quietly said what many of us have been screaming. This doesn't look like a spontaneous, frenzied killing. It looks like it was cleaned, and not just wiped down strategically. Certain spaces appear untouched, too controlled. And that van-style latent shoe print by Dylan's door. That means it wasn't visible at first glance. It had to be revealed with luminol or blue star. Why was the only print found nearly invisible? Why no footprints leading down the stairs or through the house? How do you kill 4 people, 2 in the same bed, and leave a crime scene this quiet, this contained? Let's sit with this. Dylan Mortensen said she saw a masked man in black around 4 a.m. She closed her door and froze. Didn't call 911. Bethany Funk. Yeah, she's really funky for this. The other surviving roommate says nothing, sees nothing. Also doesn't call 911. The call to authorities doesn't happen until nearly noon, around 11:58 a.m. That's 8 full hours. That's 480 minutes where no ambulance was called. No neighbor was alerted. No family was contacted with the exception of Miss Tooth's daddy. The official story. Dylan was frozen in fear. But frozen people don't clean. Frozen people don't text their friends to come over and then let them find the bodies. Because let's not forget, it wasn't even Dylan or Bethany who dialed 911. It was a friend who walked in and saw what they saw. So while people need money for healing, what about these friends who actually deserve it? You know, the friends that were set up and have the real trauma. So here's the chilling theory. Was someone cleaning that house during the delay? Were they moving things? Changing the crime scene? Were those 8 hours used to sanitize the violence and silence what really unfolded? Because if so, that's not fear, that's a cover-up. Let's say Dylan truly was traumatized. Let's say she froze, couldn't think, didn't grasp what she saw. Then what about Bethany? She wasn't even on the same floor. Her room was downstairs, far from the bloodbath. She didn't claim to see the killer. She didn't report hearing screams. She didn't report anything until it was too late. Despite the fact that Miss No Tears and her were texting about what her non-crying ass heard and saw. We have 2 adult women living in a house with 4 people being brutally slaughtered above them, with Murphy barking and with thuds, with screams, with blood. And not one call for help. This silence was not normal. This silence was strategic. And in between those hours of silence, someone might have been changing the outcome. Wiping a handle, moving a phone, destroying a camera, slipping out the back door with blood on their clothes and no trace left behind. But what if it was a clean scene? I don't give a damn who feels a way about how I feel. I will never look at these 2 liars as victims. Dylan said she saw a masked man in all black, heard crying, heard, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," and then watched him walk by. She didn't call the cops, didn't scream, didn't try to leave the house. Just closed her door and went to bed. Girl, just stop. That's not shock. That's not trauma. That's complicity, or at the very least, protection. And let's not forget, they texted friends to come over before calling 911. So you're scared, but not too scared to call your crew. I'm not letting the basement girls tell their unbelievable story. Kaylee was almost decapitated. Xana fought like hell with 67 stab wounds. Ethan, a 6 feet 2 inches athlete, ended up with 17 fatal strikes. Madison was stabbed 28 times in her bed. And meanwhile, you sat downstairs and waited for sunlight. Where's the empathy for the victims who thought you'd do the right thing and call the police? The same victims that screamed and warned your lying asses that there was someone in the house? Who died thinking the people that they cared about would get out safely and call for help? Most people scream when they are in pain during an attack and need help. They also scream to get the attention of others. You know what Dylan and Bethany heard? They heard thuds, crying, a dog barking, and then they heard silence. They could have saved someone, and didn't. I'm not saying allegedly, because if the neighbor's camera picked up those screams, you heard them too. You want to know why people feel sorry for them? Because we've been told they were just kids. Because the media protected their image and never asked hard questions. Because prosecutors didn't want to rock the boat when they had someone else to pin it on. Bryan Kohberger. But when the dust settles and you really look at the timeline, the inconsistencies, and the sheer horror of the crime, it's not pity, it's suspicion. And that suspicion is loud. You lied, you stalled, and you let your friends bleed out. So now we're not gonna feel sorry anymore. We're gonna keep asking why you were so quiet while the house filled with blood. Why forgot? They were just children with a toothache watching Vampire Diaries. Miss me with the bullshit. At this point it looks like you were involved or too damn high. It's one or the other. In my personal opinion, the parents of the actual victims are going at the wrong person for money. This wasn't just a murder. It was a stage play. Every act choreographed, every role assigned. The lone killer. The innocent roommates. The grieving families. The airtight case. But peel back the curtain, and the props start to fall apart. A knife sheath, perfectly preserved in a pool of blood. A surviving witness who sees the killer and walks away. A crime scene that somehow looks wiped down. Tell me, what kind of massacre ends with scented candles still burning and no screams on record? The roommates didn't just survive. They became the gatekeepers of a story that never made sense. Two young women, in a house with their closest friends, slept through murders that would have echoed off the walls. Dylan heard crying, saw a masked man, and still waited 8 hours to call for help. Bethany, supposedly asleep on the ground floor, never heard Xana, the girl who fought hardest, get butchered just above her. That's somebody protecting somebody. And what about the others? The DoorDash driver who saw a red-haired man with glasses. The friends who were summoned before 911. The Frat brothers with ties to more than one victim. Jack D., who took a 17-minute call from Kaylee Wright in the middle of the murder window. People were moving, talking, watching, and now they're all silent. Lawyering up. Disappearing from headlines. Because the more you talk, the more the mask slips, and someone has to keep the illusion alive. This case stopped being about justice a long time ago. Now it's about preservation. Preserving reputations. Preserving funding. Preserving institutions. This is a college town with money, prestige, and legacy on the line. If you think they'd risk it all to tell the truth, you haven't been paying attention. They needed a scapegoat, so they gave us Bryan Kohberger, and told us to stop asking questions. But some of us can't stop, because we see the blood under the rug. The timeline that doesn't add up. The girls who walked away from a house of death and never looked back. You can call it trauma. We call it theater. And when the final curtain falls, let's just hope the truth doesn't stay buried with the bodies. I don't care how many headlines called them survivors. I don't care how many networks painted them as fragile, frozen, innocent. What I see are two women who walked away from a bloodbath. Not in handcuffs, not in shock, but with enough time to text their friends, call their crew, and let hours pass while 4 bodies grew cold upstairs. That's not trauma, that's protection, but of who? That's the question they don't want us asking. Because if Dylan and Bethany weren't directly involved, then someone they knew damn well was. And now the story is unraveling. Not because authorities want it to, but because the people watching won't shut up. We saw the 17-minute call. We saw the autopsies. We saw the contradictions. A dog barking. A shoe print by Dylan's door. Lights still on. Blood everywhere. But not one call to 911 for 8 whole hours. And let's not forget, the first people summoned weren't police, they were friends. How convenient. You don't get that kind of silence without a reason. And the deeper we dig, the more it looks like this wasn't just a slaughter. It was a cover-up wearing a hoodie and a toothache. So no, we're not gonna feel sorry. Not when the timeline is warped. Not when the crime scene looks staged. Not when 4 promising lives were snuffed out while people who could have saved them chose to stay quiet. The media can keep running puff pieces. The prosecutors can keep hiding evidence. But this case will never sit right. Not until the silence is broken, not until the lies are burned down, and not until everyone in that house is questioned like lives depended on it. Because as the mother of a murdered child, and now it's too late. I say this with my whole chest. There is no amount of money that will ever feel like justice. But let's be honest. If you can sit with the way this case was handled, the contradictions, the failures, the performative grief, and still think those roommates heard nothing, then maybe you weren't seeking truth to begin with. You were seeking closure at someone else's expense. Because if that was my child upstairs, almost decapitated, screaming, fighting for their life, and someone downstairs waited 8 hours to pick up a phone, we wouldn't be in court for civil damages. We'd be in court demanding the truth. You cannot tell me with a straight face that justice was served. Not when the autopsy photos contradict the timeline. Not when the phone records, the DoorDash sighting, and the 17-minute call to Jack D. all exist like puzzle pieces no one's trying to fit together. And yet, not a single charge, not even obstruction. So excuse me if I'm not crying for the basement girls. I'm crying for the actual victims whose souls are not at rest while parents are swiping debit cards. This wasn't justice. It was damage control. And when money starts moving faster than answers, I start asking questions. Because the same media protecting the girls is the same media that profits off the dead. The same prosecutors ignoring inconsistencies are the ones making careers off convictions. But us, the ones who've buried our babies, we know better. We feel the difference between justice and distraction. And this was distraction dressed in a jumpsuit and a knife sheath. And for the record, we never did a GoFundMe. Never asked for donations. Never ran to the media with tears and hashtags. We didn't even speak out publicly until we were sitting across from the police face to face, trying to make sense of what happened. That's the only time we told our story. Not because we were hiding, but because we were grieving. Because when your child is really gone, when you're really living that kind of pain, your first instinct isn't to go viral. It's to survive. We watched people turn silence into a strategy. Turn vague statements into sympathy. Meanwhile, we were sitting with the reality. No fundraiser, no spotlight, just a mother and father trying to breathe through something that doesn't let up. So when people act like this case was handled with care, like it all adds up, I know they don't speak from experience. Because the truth, it doesn't come wrapped in NDAs and carefully edited interviews. The truth is messy and it's loud. And if you really wanted it, you'd be asking why the only thing that moved quickly in this case was the money. And let's be real. How are y'all seriously satisfied with Bryan Kohberger being the one who did this? One man. 4 victims. In and out like a ghost, with no blood trail, no time to clean up, and somehow not a single scratch on him. Baby, be for real. This wasn't a solo job. And the evidence doesn't even pretend to line up. So when Mama says folks are zooming in on the crime scene photos, analyzing every shadow and speck of blood, you're damn right we are. Because everything about this smells like a cover-up. From the magical timeline, to the missing motive, to the money that started moving before the chalk outlines were even dry. Y'all wanted a monster, and they handed you a man in a jumpsuit, wrapped it up with a knife sheath, sprinkled in some media theatrics, and called it closure. But those of us who've buried our babies, we know what justice actually feels like. And this isn't it. So while you're busy playing Mommy of the Year on Facebook, just know, people see right through that. Every staged photo, every carefully worded caption, we see it all. But hey, as long as the money's right and the post goes viral, I guess grief doesn't have to be real. It just has to be profitable. I don't want this kind of justice.